Hello and welcome to the interview on France 24. It's commonly said that European elites have lost the trust of their citizens, hence the dwindling popularity of the EU and the rise of populist forces across the continent. How did this happen? My guest today argues that the political establishment was captured by the finance industry and effectively handed over its democratic power. Eva Joly is a prominent member of the European Parliament for the Green Party group. She's Franco-Norwegian, and she was the investigating magistrate in several financial scandals in France in the 1990s. She also worked in the inquiry into the banking crisis in Iceland more recently. Welcome to the programme.
Thank you.
Now, for you, one man embodies the current politico-financial system in Europe, and that is Jean-Claude Juncker, the president of the European Commission, and he is the target of your book, a book in which you take no prisoners, and the title, as we can see there in our graphic, is The Wolf in the Sheepfold. A very strong image. Why a wolf in a sheepfold?
Because I couldn't understand how a man like Jean-Claude Juncker, who has been in politics for more than 30 years, who has been Minister of Finance of Luxembourg, Prime Minister of Luxembourg, but also in the European institutions, with everything that was on the table concerning what he has achieved for Luxembourg, that he could become the head of the Commission.
A conflict of interest for you.
Yes, and this book is about his life, what he has achieved, and the contradiction. The image is very strong, but also because the citizens are entitled to wait for a shepherd or somebody that where they can trust that his interests are your interests, are the citizens' interests. But everything we know about Jean-Claude Juncker tells us that he is the man of the finance industry and of the multinational companies.
The reason, though, why this wolf was let into the sheepfold, to use your metaphor, is that the system already existed before he came into power. And as you say in your book, the European Union collectively allowed companies to pay taxes not in the country where they're active, but in the country where they have their legal seat. And this was already in place before he was on the scene.
There is a huge difference between Luxembourg and the Netherlands or the UK, because the model of development of Luxembourg is based on stealing the tax revenues from other countries. They are doing it also in the Netherlands or in the UK, but they have other models also. They also have a real industry. Do you know that in Luxembourg, only 5% of the investments are real investments?
So by stealing, you mean taxes that would otherwise have been paid in other countries?
Absolutely. Taxes that should have been paid in the UK or in Germany or in France are not being paid anywhere, actually, because they are not paying Luxembourg taxes either. Luxembourg taxes is 29% on the benefit, and nobody pays that. They have a personal deal, which is secret, by which they can pay 0.1% on the benefit.
And this secret is exactly what was the topic of the LuxLeaks trial, isn't it? This banking secret. And there are now two gentlemen who are in the dock in a court.
Yes.
The trial continues on May the 10th of this LuxLeaks trial. Do you think that there's it's likely that there will be some kind of legal protection for whistleblowers in the future? That's, of course, what you're arguing for with your group of Greens in the European Parliament.
Yes, we think that this process is indecent, that the people who takes care of the public interest, they are the accused, and the victims are those who should be in the box. So this is the word, the upside down. And I really hope that Antoine Deltour and Edouard Perrin will not be convicted or will have a very symbolic fine. So in order to avoid this to happen, we want a new directive, a new European directive on protection of whistleblowers.
But that's going to be a matter for national governments, isn't it? I mean, you can't achieve that at the European level, can you?
Well, we think that this has to do with conditions of work, and this is of the competence of the European Union.
What do you think Luxembourg should have done? It didn't have much choice, did it? Back when its heavy industries collapsed, it would now be one of the poorest countries in Europe if it had not attracted these multinationals.
Do you think that is an argument that can be used? I have no other choice than to behave in a way that damages my neighbor countries. It's exactly the argument that the opium cultivators are using in Afghanistan. The peasant says that nothing else can grow here.
But
so they are poisoning the whole population.
Would you accept that argument if, at least in Luxembourg, the official tax rate was being respected?
Well, this is not. We are not talking about tax competition here. It's nothing loyal at all. It is about a small office called Office Number 6 with Mr. Kreke, who was there for 30 years, who spent his time putting a rub stamp on a request from PricewaterhouseCoopers asking for Shine, the UK company, to pay only 0.1% taxes. And this was secret. And there are no pharmaceutical industry in Luxembourg. It is only sale of the Luxembourg sovereignty.
Next year, though, Luxembourg will lift its banking secrecy rule. Obviously, it's been a very long struggle. Do you think the system will stay the same, though? Or will it really change?
We spent 15 years obtaining that the Luxembourg should play by the rules. I think things are accelerating because the public opinion is understanding what we are talking about, and people do not accept it anymore.
Eva Joly, of course, all of this discussion has to do with broader issues of transparency, democracy, citizens feeling alienated from Europe. And another big topic at the moment in the news is the transatlantic free trade deal. I interviewed the Vice President of the European Commission partly about TTIP, and I want us to take a listen together to what she had to say about the TTIP leaks. Let's take a listen now.
Yes.
I believe that we are fighting very hard to protect the standards in Europe in the TTIP negotiations, and we will continue to fight for that. We have made our negotiations very transparent. My colleague, Commissioner Malmström, put out everything that is a position of the European Union. And I'm sure that the Americans, from their perspective, are fighting for what they perceive to be their interests.
I very much respect Kristalina Georgieva. She is a very good person, very good negotiator. But it is the gap is too big between the forces of the US and the European Union. And also because you cannot let these important negotiations for the European citizens in the hands of the business. They are discussing, negotiating with business, the American Business Chamber, and they are negotiating the rules that are protecting us, our health, the food we are eating, the quality of water, of air, and we are not taking the highest protective rule. It is on the table, and this should not happen. This should not happen. These negotiations must be stopped because they are very dangerous.
Do you think the wind is now blowing against TTIP, though, because the French government, for example, has said that it's not going to support the deal in its current form, and I think public awareness of TTIP has grown around Europe as well?
The awareness has grown among the population, but also in the US. And this agreement would only be to the benefit of the multinational companies, to the detriment of the citizens.
Do you think that the TTIP leaks themselves have somehow affected the public debate?
I think it was very important to inform the public opinion, really, and I'm happy that somebody leaked it. What was not normal was that it was so secretive.
I want to get back to the introduction of your book, because all of these issues, of course, come back to what you describe as this capture of democracy by financial and political oligarchies.
Yes.
You say this is not the Europe that citizens expected when the Berlin Wall came down in 1989, and that they're now disappointed. But I want to put it to you that Europe has always been an elite construction ever since the 1950s. So is it perhaps a bit naive to date this disenchantment back to the fall of communism?
No, I think that Europe has delivered on many issues, on peace, on common playing rules in many domains. And there is a hope to have a better European Union. And we have made some errors in favor of the financial industry, and this must be repaired. And we see the extent also in the Panama Papers. And we see in the Panama Papers that 25% of all the fictive companies set up were done on request from Luxembourg banks. Luxembourg is in the center. And the Panama Papers shows us that elite all over the world has captured democracy, and that we are witnessing only a kind of shadow play. So it's time for the politicians to come back and to take the power back again.
We'll end on that note. Thank you so much for being our guest on the interview, Eva Joly, a prominent member of the European Parliament for the Green Group. That's all we have time for on the interview. Do stay tuned to France 24. More news coming up shortly.